don't bury your head in the sand. Don't walk away. Don't accept it without critical insights. But to really think, what is our role? How can we use our autonomy to leverage this tool for our benefit, rather than letting the tool leverage us for its benefit? So these tools are very specialized. So people need to be aware of them before they can start analyzing them.
Welcome to the CFI Faculty Lounge Podcast, an outlet created for continuous learning and actionable insights for faculty. I'm your host, Eric Magrum, inviting you to join us in conversation with dedicated educators who share their experiences, challenges, and effective solutions. Today, I'm excited to welcome Dr. Michael Klein, professor in the Department of Interdisciplinary Liberal Studies. Welcome, Michael, and thank you for being here with us today.
Thanks, Eric. It's a real pleasure to be here.
AI, or generative AI, has become a major cultural topic, showing up everywhere from Hollywood to social media. How do you think popular culture has shaped the public's understanding or misunderstanding of generative AI?
I think it's had a much bigger influence in shaping the overall perceptions of AI in general. And generative AI is just one form of AI. I think generative AI is so new that popular culture hasn't tackled it as much as the people who are using it. The fact that people have now direct access to a type of AI is what is shaping, the narratives and the stories we're hearing about it.
So I recently learned that, because I don't know why I thought generative AI, like ChatGPT and Copilot, that was AI, but I've recently learned it's much, much, much larger than that. Can you speak to that a little bit?
Sure. There's a variety of facets to AI. There's robotics. There's large language models, which generative AI draws upon. There's also like deep thinking. So AI is a catch-all term that's been around since the 1950s to describe these different aspects of AI, and generative AI is just one aspect that's gotten a lot of notoriety since November 2022 because of ChatGPT being released in the wild, so to speak.
So if we were to use an analogy, if we were talking about food as AI, would generative AI or like ChatGPT, Copilot, would that be a Hershey's Kiss, or would that be something different? Like that proportionally?
I think it's bigger than that.
Okay.
Whether it deserves to be bigger than that or should be bigger than that, I'm not sure. But I think it's if you think of AI as the four food groups, or maybe it's five now.
Okay.
But it's one of the groups.
Okay.
Because of the impact it's had on the average person.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do think because it's so user friendly, and it's effectively, the way that I use it sometimes is an enhanced Google search. It's the new Ask Jeeves if we want to go real far back.
Right.
But it gives you way better answers than it asks you if you are happy with the answer at the end.
Well, that's interesting you bring that up. Something I tell my students is that it's most effective to use Gen AI when you know the subject matter, because then you can tell if it's giving you a legitimate answer. But of course, many people are going to use it for something they don't know, but there's no way for them really to tell if it's accurate unless they go out and do their own research. But if they're using generative AI, they probably don't have the time or inclination to be doing that and want this shorthand process.
So can you talk about a little bit that dichotomy that it seems like it's a never-ending loop of, okay, to use AI, you want to use AI to learn. But in order to really utilize AI to its full extent, you need to know enough to know when it's not speaking the truth or it's having hallucinations, et cetera. Can you speak a little bit about that?
Sure. AI wants to please you. So if it can't find an answer, sometimes it just produces an answer. And hopefully it's gotten better in the last few years, but I remember at a talk, a keynote speaker said that he used Gen AI to talk about what are his top 10 publications for the general audience. And it produced a list, and he actually had never written any of those. It made him up. Now, he said he got some great ideas from it of stuff he would write, but because he was the expert on himself, he would know that, but anyone else may not have unless they followed him. The thing is, AI, Gen AI, it's a tool. And I tell students, don't be overly reliant on a single tool when you have access to a number of them. So I'm very much middle of the road. I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with Gen AI as a tool. There's other issues that surround it, of course, but nor do I think it's a panacea that will solve all our problems. It's just another tool, just like Google could be a tool, Wikipedia could be a tool, but so could, scholarly articles, so could books written by experts. And so what that means is be careful of how you utilize it, be aware of how you're utilizing it, and utilize it as part of what you're doing in order to access information.
So that's come up a lot, the tool. And I use a lot of analogies. They just work with me, but I think about it as putting tools in your tool belt. How do we teach students to use it as a tool rather than the panacea or the end-all, be-all? Basically, they're just offloading their tasks to this AI as opposed to, okay, using this tool to make my products better, they're just using it to create products that then they turn in.
I think we have to educate them on that. We cannot shy away from it. And there's been a lot of different ways universities have approached this. For example, Georgetown has banned the use of AI completely from all courses. Ohio State, on the flip side, has embraced AI to be used as much as possible in as many courses as possible. And I think in both those cases, and I mean, these are really good institutions, so I'm not wanting to critique them,
right.
but I don't think it's a critical perspective to have. I think you need something more in the middle of the road where you talk about it, you show what it can do, you show what it can't do or what it does wrong, and then you talk about other tools that could be doing similar things so that in conjunction, it could accentuate what you're already doing, but it certainly shouldn't replace what you're already doing, and certainly should not be used uncritically.
Yeah, I like an AI. Here's another analogy. It's chainsaw dangerous. And we need to, you don't run a chainsaw unless you know how to use a chainsaw.
Exactly.
But it also doesn't chop the wood for you. You have to use the chainsaw in the way that a chainsaw was meant to be used, as opposed to, we got a chainsaw on the work site. Okay, somebody has to use it, and somebody has to use the product of that. And I do think the downsides are chainsaw dangerous. Not the immediate downsides or the more obvious, but like we hear in the news that young individuals they have a somewhat of a romantic relationship with an AI, or they have
literally.
Yeah. Or they have situations where they've talked to AI as if it was a counselor and it counsels them into harming themselves. You teach a class on AI that you've mentioned previously. Like, do those topics come up, and then what are your thoughts on those topics?
They do. I co-teach it with Dr. Phil Frana, who's a colleague and friend of mine in IDLS as well, and we co-developed the course and have taught it 3 times now. We do talk about it, and that's where we get some of the most emotional reaction from the students who just find it horrific that, of course, anyone would take their life, but it was precipitated by an interaction with an artificial thing that is not intelligent, has no intelligence. I mean, the name itself is a misnomer. It does certain things really well, sometimes better than humans, but it only does what it's asked to do, like really any tool.
Yeah.
And keeping with your chainsaw analogy, Yeah, chainsaws have been a boon to the timber industry. But if you're going to trim a bonsai, you don't use a chainsaw. You use something that's been around a lot longer.
Yeah.
So the chainsaw does not replace all other cutting implements before it. It just is another tool that can be used in specific situations.
Are there other nefarious ways that it impacts us? Are there other ways that and those are the two that have just come top of mind. I've seen it in the news. Are there other ways that people should be aware that, hey, we might need to think about this a little bit more for this particular area?
Well, certainly. AIs are trained. They're trained on large amounts of data and information. So the question you have to ask is, where did you get the data from? Who decides what data is used in the training? There's been cases where data that has been used, it has biases in it in terms of, say, hiring a woman for what is considered a male profession, erroneously considered, I want to add. But if that's the data it's been trained on, it's just going to replicate that. So again, it's a mirror of us as a society in many ways, because that's the data that's available.
So it's only as good as the data it was trained on.
It's only as good as the data it's trained on, and so you always ask, who makes the decision of what's it being trained on.
Got it. So what do you think AI, more than other technologies, has captured so much of the attention of the public?
I think part of it is, as I mentioned before, is because of the personal interaction people can have with it. Robotics is also very exciting, and people love robots, and they've been a large facet of our culture and pop culture. But most people can't go out and just purchase a robot and train a robot or build a robot. But ChatGPT is a lot more accessible. Not for everyone, of course. I don't want to ignore the idea of the digital divide. But for people who are lucky enough to have access to the internet, they can interact with it. And if they do so in a limited fashion, they don't even have to pay for that privilege of interacting with it. And it's immediate. I mean, it gives you an answer pretty quickly. And as I said, if it's trying to please you, sometimes you get answers that you already thought may have been right. Not that it's trying to deceive anyone, but it's a tool that wants to please in that way.
Are there ways to prompt it to not do that? Or is there a way to say, give me both sides of this argument? Would that be?
It can.
Okay.
You could ask a debate on a specific topic. Please give me a rationale for using this or for not using this. Say anything. But again, if you don't know exactly who trained it and what it was trained on, you still might be getting a skewed interpretation of it.
I think part of it is learning a new language and how to prompt. I mean, because I've gotten better with my prompting of AI. What's the process by which you, in your class, go about talking about prompting or teaching prompting?
You want to provide as much context as possible. I have a background in technical communication and writing and rhetoric, so language is an important part of how I approach it. So I tell the students, you give a narrative, tell it exactly what you are asking for and what you hope to, what you're expecting to get as an output. And if you're not, then tell it what it did wrong and tweak it, tweak the responses. Prompt engineering is a big deal right now, but then there's a lot of discussions. Well, is it something that you could actually be trained to do and make a living, or is it something that as AI gets better, you won't need to give as much context, that as it's trained on the way to respond to people, that it'll be able to take in less information, but have a very better hunch of what is truly being asked of it. One of the assignments that we have our students do is to create 2 prompts, one in a more formal, like academic setting, and one in a more informal setting, and then provide those 2 prompts to 2 different AI platforms. And the thing that amazes the students most is that they get different outputs with the same exact prompt. And whether it's a formal prompt or an informal prompt, they're going to get different outputs. And many of them didn't realize that. They thought it was, you'll just get pretty much the same answer. And so we asked them to reflect upon that and reflect upon the process of learning about that. And I think it's one of the most productive exercises we have them do, because it allows them to firsthand see AI, generative AI in action, and see that it isn't going to give you what you expect all the time, and it's going to differ amongst the different AI platforms, which is because they were trained on different large language models and have different ways of processing information.
I think I'm going to have to steal that assignment idea. But
you're more than welcome to it. I'm happy to share it.
In any case.
And I must add, too, that students are kind of freaked out that they're actually being asked to use AI.
Really?
Yes. And they sometimes comment they felt guilty, even though that was part of the assignment. We understood they were doing it, that if they didn't do it, they couldn't actually finish the assignment. And it made Phil and I realize that even though this is supposed to be, the generation that's very comfortable with technology, some of them have never used it before. Some of them don't want to use it. And some of them only use it when it is permissible. And depending on their discipline, it's something that is more permissible or not permissible at all, or there's really no guidance given.
Yeah, and I do think there's a rather large chasm between faculty on this. It seems a faculty is split, at least in the circles that I've had conversations with folks. It seems it's either I'm pro AI or I'm very anti. And I'm sure there's some in the middle, like you said yourself. You're somewhere in the middle. But it seems either like, okay, I either use it or I absolutely abolish it, almost like the Georgetown or the Ohio State factoids.
Yeah, and that's, JMU, to their credit, has said it's up to the individual instructor what to do, and I appreciate the autonomy. But for a student who's taking 5 or 6 classes, they might have 5 or 6 policies they have to follow regarding AI, and then what happens if they confuse the policy for one class for another class, which can happen when you're under deadlines, and all of a sudden they're doing something they thought was okay, but is in direct violation of the honor code for that specific class.
Right.
On the other hand, I don't think there should be an overall policy for the entire university, because different disciplines and different courses and different instructors have different ways of approaching this or any topic, really.
Right. So speaking of students, what skills or literacies should students be developing to think critically about AI's impact on society?
I think the same skills that we've always been asking them to develop, which is critical thinking, critical reading, critical writing, being able to discern a credible source from a non-credible source. And if you think of the outputs of Gen AI as just a source that you need to assess its credibility, then it becomes a much more robust tool for them to use, and something that can potentially be more beneficial. But I don't think we have to teach them new skills. I think we just have to make sure that we're really doing a good job of teaching the skills that are at the heart of education, to be able to think critically about any topic.
Do you think, in your opinion, particularly with this class, do you think AI has diminished students' ability to critically think, read, write, assess credibility? Or has it been rather unchanged?
It's a good question. I think in a way, an over-reliance on AI causes student and people. Let's say people. I'm not pointing a finger just at students. Causes people just not to learn as well about something. If it does everything for you, how are you going to learn?
Right.
And example I give is about writing. Writing is as much about the process as it is the product. But if you have AI generate the product, you have eliminated the process that you would go through to learn. And writing to learn is a big idea that is important. That part of writing is not just to communicate ideas with others, but to have you reflect on the ideas and grapple with them. So I think it's detrimental, not so much in eliminating critical thinking, because you could still use AI and do critical thinking by assessing the output and then looking at other sources. But I think it definitely, that shortcut really hinders the ability to learn something and truly understand that thing. And that's, I think, what higher education is about. You come here to learn, not just to produce materials.
Agreed. How do you think the narratives we tell about AI today will shape the next generation's relationship with technology and or AI?
I think the metaphors we use for AI are really shaping the way we think about it. That it's an oracle, that it can predict the future, it can tell us what's going to happen, that it can solve problems. So, and the metaphors are important. It helps us understand things, but it also limits our ability to assess things. So I think that's part of it. Those narratives or the metaphors involved in those narratives are shaping how we view AI. On the flip side, 20 years from now, the next generation, I don't think AI is going to look the way it does now. It's going to be something different, and the way we approach it will be different. So I think one of the best things we can do for students, and this is true for really anything and most disciplines, is to be nimble. Be able to assess things the way you've been trained, but also take that training and apply it in new and different ways. Because we can't anticipate everything they'll need to know. Like, say, in writing, you can't anticipate everything, every circumstance they'll have to write. So you give them the tools and the experience so that they can approach new situations and adapt what they already know to that situation. So especially then with AI, with a technology that is changing rapidly, 6 months is forever when it comes to technology, but especially a technology that has this much focus on it, has this much money being thrown at it, and is being used in so many different ways. We're going to think of it and look at it and interface with it in a variety of different ways over the next 20 years.
So is AI something that we should have pursued? And that's a really loaded question.
It's a philosophical question in many ways. There's the famous saying, just because we can do something doesn't necessarily mean we should. We have.
Yeah.
We have pursued it.
Yeah.
You cannot put that genie back in that bottle.
Exactly.
So how we approach it now is extremely important. How we think about possibilities, limitations, and our response to it is very important. I think that for a lot of people, it's just a done deal. It's going to happen, and so now it's reactive. The questions they ask are reactive. How do we save jobs? Which, of course, is important. How do we utilize this in the school? How do we keep students from cheating? Well, I hate questions like that. because then you start assuming that students are going to cheat, and you're going to look for cheating all the time, even when it's not there. I think we could ask questions that are more proactive. I don't like that word, but in this case, I think it's important.
Yeah.
We should ask questions about how will we choose to utilize AI, not how the marketing wants us to use it,
Right.
not how these big corporations are making billions and billions of dollars off of it, but how do we want to utilize it? And I think the best way to do that is to face it. Don't bury your head in the sand. Don't walk away. Don't accept it without critical insights. But to really think, what is our role? How can we use our autonomy to leverage this tool for our benefit rather than letting the tool leverage us for its benefit?
So what, in your experience with AI, what safeguards, what I'll call them guidelines, would you put in place for responsible AI usership or interfacing?
First, familiarity with what it is and what it isn't, what it can do, what it can't do. I think that's part of what we try to teach the students in the class is what exactly is it and what can it do and what does it not do well. ChatGPT is very good at Gen AI. It's lousy at basic arithmetic because it wasn't trained to do that. There's other programs that do that very well. You know, calculators, they do arithmetic and higher forms of math really well, but they also won't, create an essay for you. So these tools are very specialized. So people need to be aware of them before they can start analyzing them. And it may sort of introduce a catch-22, but I don't think it necessarily has to. It's just the fact that new technology of any sort is frightening, especially, or anything new is frightening, but new technology is frightening, especially when it is at least perceived as having such a large impact on us, not only as individuals, but as a culture. And it does have a large impact. But a lot of the AI that we experience, unbeknownst to us, has been around for a while. If you think about Amazon and what it says you should buy based on what you bought before, that's algorithm. At the heart of AI is the algorithm, which is a set of instructions that tells it what to do. And so that's been around a while. That's been around almost as long as Amazon's been around. And other companies do the same thing. Going in with a real appreciation of what its potential is, as well as its deficiencies. To know that we can't speak of it as the Deus ex machina, the machine from the gods that will save us at the end of the story. That, and I know I'm saying this over and over, but it's just another tool.
Yeah.
It's the hype tool. It's the important tool. It's the tool that we're being forced to use whether we want to or not, as it's being built into more and more laptops and tablets and smartphones. Being informed, I think, is the best way so that we can have personal safeguards, but then we could also lobby for greater safeguards.
So let's say that somebody would choose, I'm not going to be an AI person. I'm just not going to use it. Would they be able to do that? Because I start to think about how many things are, oh, wow, it's embedded in that, and it's embedded in it fills out my sentences when I'm texting someone. I mean, I feel like it would be rather difficult to get away from it.
I think I agree. I think you would have to just disengage from most modern communicative technologies, go off the grid even, and people do that.
Yeah.
They want to do that. But even if you're not actively seeking to use AI is in the background of so many things that you'll probably use it and won't even be aware of it. So for somebody who wants to cut it completely out of their life, that's a lot of work that they're going to have to do.
We're not going to go off on a huge tangent here, but the parallel would be the plastics conversation. Like, what isn't in plastic anymore? Like, because the whole plastics, et cetera. But it's a similar conversation. Like, what lengths would you have to go to eradicate that from your life? And the answer is great lengths.
For anything that's ubiquitous, it takes a lot of effort.
Yeah.
But they're right. If they wish to do that, more power to them.
Yeah.
Really. It's just that then from a cultural perspective, people will say, well, what's wrong with them? Why are they doing that?
There's so many ramifications.
They'll become othered very quickly if they don't. And that's another pressure that's being put on them that is really just created. It's a societal creation, that this technological determinism that, well, it's here, so we have to use it, at least for some things, makes it even harder then for people who do want to just stay away from it.
What kind of public conversations about AI do you wish were happening, but maybe aren't?
Why? What is AI going to do for us as individuals as opposed to what it does for corporations who are making billions of dollars? And I'm keenly aware we live in a capitalist society, and so corporations make money. I mean, that's part of why they exist. But what are its long-term impacts going to be? And the impacts go beyond just learning. There are huge environmental impacts, and I kind of alluded to this earlier. The server farms that we see in Northern Virginia, some of the largest groups of server farms in the world, because that's a real backbone. They take up land, they take up energy, they take up water for cooling. They shape the environment in a way that may not be necessary. Rarely do people ask, do we need it? Do we need it to this extent? What else can we use instead of it or with it? But does it need to get this big and this powerful? Because oftentimes, those questions that we are asking already give ground to that and already accept the fact, this is happening. How do we protect ourselves from it? Well, which is a good question, but we don't need to accept that it's happening in the way that corporations want it to happen, as opposed to it'll happen the way that people want it to happen.
The price of progress. If that's progress. Question mark.
My other background's in science and technology studies, and there's one thing you don't like to do is talk about technological progress.
Okay.
Because then I'm not criticizing you at
that's
all.
Okay.
It's just progress for whom?
Exactly.
Exactly. Is it progress for those who own the means of production? Is it progress for the end user? Is it progress for the state? So you have to ask those questions. And exactly what is progress? There's evolution, there's change, but progress implies that it has a unidirectional approach and that it's always getting better.
I think that's something we don't think about either, is we think about it might be able to one day help us cure a disease that we have not been able to cure. But how much land and how much water are we taking away, all that, and how many of those dark things are happening in the scenes for that to occur. And then the folks who want perhaps a simpler life, the folks who don't want to have a robot walk in and ask me if I want a bottle of water or whatever, or if I want them to pour the water in my mouth. I don't need the robot to do that. In fact, I don't want a robot. I want some land, and I want a dog or whatever, a cat.
Yeah.
The simple things, and I think sometimes that is bliss. And sometimes the quote-unquote progress, or what's seen as progress, actually impedes what we used to have.
And going along with the question about what conversations aren't we having, you don't get to see a lot of how it is being utilized in a very, not so much Gen AI, but AI in general, how it's being utilized in different disciplines. I went to the VASM conference, which is a collection of Virginia scientists and medical experts, the Virginia Society for Engineering and Science, Engineering, and Medicine. And it was AI was the theme this year.
Okay.
And AI in Virginia specifically. Okay. And we heard some really wonderful presentations for like an astronomer at UVA who's using it to actually get at data and actually see data in a whole different way and in a much faster way than it would be possible for a human to do, or for traditional computational methods. And so they're not looking for a shortcut. They're looking to enhance the outputs that they have so they can further study those. So it's just one part of the long chain of inquiry that they're doing. We don't hear enough of those stories. Right. And maybe for a lot of people, it's not as sexy as being able to ask some, Chat GPT something. But I think it's important, and I think a lot of disciplines have leveraged AI as a component of what they do, but haven't fixated on, this can replace everything that we do. Mm-hmm. And there's also other disciplines who've come out with statements saying that we will not utilize AI in our practices. Mm-hmm. I believe sociology is one of those. They will study AI and how it's used by people because that's what they do. They study those things, but they don't want to actually utilize it in the practices that they're doing. So we need to hear more stories like that a discipline, or at least an organization that speaks for members of a discipline, have taken a specific stance and have explained why they've taken that stance.
If you could give faculty one takeaway about AI, something to keep in mind as the field evolves, what would that be?
Just one?
or multiple. If you want some bonuses, go for it.
I think don't shy away from talking about it. Now, in some disciplines, it's not going to be helpful to actually use, but I think having a discussion about why it won't be helpful is important to explain the rationale. But just pretending that it's not going to happen is as dangerous as pretending that it will solve all our problems and we can just do away with faculty and we can do away with these groups of individuals working these jobs. So I think not that they have to embrace it, because a lot of times that's a personal choice, as it should be, but to talk about it with students and explain why or why not our discipline uses it, or in what circumstances can it be used. But as we know, oftentimes when you tell somebody they can't do something, that just encourages them to do it even more.
Yes.
So, but actually talking about it in a respectful way amongst people, I think you'll have better outcomes in that sense. I'd also say don't be frightened of it, that the universities are going to shut down because of AI. I don't think they will. And as my friends know, I can be a little pessimistic at times. So for me, this is un-Michael-like in so many ways. But remember, all those prognostications, they come through a filter of the media, and the media's job is to get eyes on the page or on the screen. And so if you actually read beyond the headlines, sometimes the story itself is much different. But I think go about what you've been doing and doing so well and have been trained to do, and just acknowledge that here's another facet, but it's something that we have the ability to control and use as we see fit. Especially at a university like JMU, which has not dictated an overall strategy. And I know some colleges have given some guidance, but again, not dictating it.
Yeah.
But I think the worst thing we could do as faculty is just pretend it's not there. And I'm not implying that anyone is doing that. Just like with anything, just pretending it's not there doesn't make it go away. We can't Schrodinger everything by just not opening the box.
Well, very good. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast today, Michael. I appreciate your time, and I've appreciated the conversation.
I have too, Eric. Thank you so much for having me.
That's it for today's episode of the CFI Faculty Lounge Podcast. A big thank you to our guests, the CFI Ops team, Sarah Rush, Via Chapin, and most importantly, you, our listeners. If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with a colleague. To stay updated on new podcast episodes and other faculty development opportunities, click the link in the description to join our listserv. Thanks for listening, and tune in next time for more meaningful conversations about teaching and faculty life.